Hi there. My name is Shaz Barbaric, and I'm going to talk a little bit about my life today. Is that okay? Alright, let us begin now. Looks like today's a little bit overcast. Right now it's 12:19. 12:19, and the day is just 1 minute. 1 minute while I pull up the day. It's Monday, December 10th, 2018. 12:20 now. It's 12:20. Let me pull up what we're going to discuss today. Just one moment. It's a little dark, a little bit overcast, so I'm going to come out a little shady. A little bit shaded. It's okay though. Look, we have a little bit of color from the screen. That's good. It's going to give my face a little bit more color. Now we're going to pull up where we were last time. Complete American's Guide to Revolution, yes. The Complete American's Guide to Revolution. Written by one S.B. Barrack. That's myself. S.B. Barrack, okay. Yes, I did 3 videos. 3 of these videos. Let me just pull up the last video. Let me check. I believe so. And then the last video, I didn't speak so much about this topic. I spoke about my grandmother. She just passed recently, yes. So we spoke a little bit about that. My folks, they're driving back right now. They're driving back from Northern California. They should be arriving about the time that I'm finishing up these videos. We'll aim for 3 videos today, and then about 3 to 4 videos as we finish up this project. We have about 2 weeks left. Yes, a week from this Saturday will be the 22nd. That's my father's birthday. I promised my parents I'd finish this project and take it out of their kitchen by then, so that'll be a good bookend to this project. Started it around the 4th of November, my mother's birthday, and ended the 22nd of December, my father's birthday. 3 days before Christmas and the winter solstice, I believe. So these are good dates to try to bookend a project. Let's see how much we have left to go. I believe we're starting now. We're starting the Occupy Wall Street portion, yes. So let me look at Complete American's Guide to Revolution real quick, because that's a very good joining piece in my life between what I was doing before Occupy Wall Street and what I was doing afterwards. So I read it straight through, and then we used that third video to comment on my life. Right now it's Monday. These first videos, especially at the beginning of the week, usually I don't do videos on the weekend. I made an exception on Saturday because we want to finish this project within 2 weeks. But then on Sunday I went to Slab City for the second time, this time by myself, and reaffirmed some connections I made previously there, and let my mind wander to what I'm going to do after I finish this project and after the money comes in. Some may say, will the money come in? But the money always comes in. The money always seems to come in. So we must plan accordingly. Let's see. So I went through the table of contents. I believe I spoke previously how Shah, the first real relationship I had, if we had to recap the life, I'm 28, 29 now. It's 2011. The beginning of 2000, let's go back to the beginning. I was born in 1982. I had a childhood in which I socialized a little bit roughly. There was a little bit of bullying, but then I became friends, and so I had parallel tracks in my development where I was always invited to honors classes and the smart classes because I was one of the smart ones. But then also I had issues with authority, and I also had a rugged sense of independence that seems to be innate, seems also to be genetic, and it was also fostered by my parents, who were both the youngest in their families, one the youngest of 4, and the other one the youngest of 10, who's my mother we're talking about. Her mother died 2 years after she was born, giving birth to the 11th. They both died during childbirth. And then her father died when she was 6 or 8. So she was orphaned and raised by her eldest siblings. always doing housework and women lead duties in a culture such as Mexico. The woman is taught to keep the home to be a good housewife. My mother rejected that. And then my father, on his end, while he developed, uh, two of his three older siblings were heavily involved in selling drugs and doing pretty, being a little bit more than rambunctious teenagers. His older sister was in prison in Mexico, trying to smuggle drugs in during the 70s, and yeah, 60s and 70s. And his brother had a whole bunch of stories, but they finally went on the straight and narrow. My father's father was a World War II pilot and captain of a base, so he was an authoritarian. So the kids all rebelled against his authority, but my father's older brother settled down in a meat delivery business and later on had his own grocery store. So he settled down into responsible adulthood somewhat until after so many marriages, married, divorce, he moved to Costa Rica where he died April 2018. It seems like he had gone a little bit too wild. Rumors of partying and the circumstances of his death were definitely a little bit wilder than your average retirement plan. And then my aunt, she got married and had kids, and she stopped being so crazy. But not before she met Timothy Leary and had some other crazy 60s adventures. My father rebelled against this by actually doing good in school. So his parents, by the fourth one, didn't have much energy for him, but he was born epileptic, uh, with half the blood supply to certain regions of his brain. In fact, some regions not even getting any blood, and that's where the seizures happen. He's been on a heavy prescription of barbiturates since he was 6 or 9 when the seizures first started happening. But despite that, played a lot of sports, graduated high school early, went to community college, transferred to Cal State School, Cal State San Diego, while working to put himself through school, and was pretty much independent and never used his disability as a crutch. Met my mother in LA, my mother being rebellious as well. Escaped out from her older siblings' thumb, came to LA when she was 17, taught herself English, started working in insurance. That's when she met my father. He was working in a bank. They met on a city bus in Los Angeles and got married 6 months later. Had my older brother about 6 months after that, which tells you that maybe they got married 9 months, maybe 6 months after they met. But it was a whirlwind romance. Conservative Christian mother. My dad knocked her up. They were not going to stick together, but they decided to, and they've been developing their relationship as I can see it ever since. Very volatile when we were growing up, but as you piece together the pieces, they didn't have good role models on how to act responsibly with their emotions and develop, and some of their blind spots, which I feel allow them to be preyed on financially and also politically, are those original blind spots. When you're young, you want to develop this control over your emotions, if not control, at least a way to process your stronger emotions, so that way you're not manipulated through them. So there's stuff that I've learned. So growing up, obviously I inherited a genetic predisposition for anti-authoritarianism, but they also have told me as we get older and have discussions that are less emotionally charged, since the past is enough maybe in our rear view, that we can start analyzing it dispassionately, although we still hit tripwires where we need our timeouts like everyone else. They tell me that they were always told what to do as the youngest, so they wanted to raise children without those boundaries. So they did give me, I feel, some of their blind spots, which I've been working on. Shame associated with sex, passed down through the religion, subservience to authority and class, passed down from not really breaking through. Just now they're breaking through maybe middle class lifestyle, but most of our life we grew up without much. And so you grow up with a superstition about money and people who have it. but for the faults and the insecurities which throughout my life I've been working on identifying my blind spots and not passing judgment onto my folks. No one's perfect and they do the best they can. The things that I really thank them for are that childhood in which I was raised without people telling me I can't do something. I was failing out of high school. My dad took me aside after disciplining me as a disciplinarian, finally took me aside and said, I trust you'll be successful. If this isn't for you, that's fine. To take the pressure off instead of grinding me into the ground. And the same thing with my mother when we talk about religion, whatever topic, my drug use, my politics, whatever topic I talk about, even if they don't agree with me, which a lot of the things, if not most of the things we discuss, they're not on my side. We still have civil conversation, and that alone, that practice of speaking things out, being rational, or at least coming back to rationality after we have our outbursts, it's probably very formative in my development, feeling that there's no things off limits, no taboos. Therefore, I can explore the world honestly. If they didn't give me the template of a honest explanation of the world because they haven't built one themselves and have limited tools to build one, they at least gave me the tools to build one, which is honest inquiry, which we always respected in our household. So I appreciate them for that. So yes, I grew up and I was socialized through school, which I never completely bought into, but because also I made friends with a school bully who then socialized me in other ways. And we respected physical toughness and having a word, being courageous, taking a stand. You can't always be the toughest person, but you can try to be the most honest, at least in your own life, and then you're going to learn. And these lessons on the childhood playground and running around with other kids taught me a lot of sociology and psychology, which was experiential, which I find lines up with the science as I understand it now, and I'd like to get more into it. When I graduated high school, instead of going to college, not buying completely into the authority of the educated class, I decided to round out my experience by doing something harder. I thought that would be the military. It would challenge me. After a couple of years in that, I realized that my anti-authoritarianism was a little bit too much for a military career. My desire to be free and seek wisdom through experience led me to a very interesting, I don't know what you would call it, trail of disciplinary measures through the military. I went in as an E2, which is a second rank, came out as an E1, which is the first rank. So I lost rank, I lost money, I lost freedom. Sometimes for taking personal stands for my own freedom, a lot of times just for doing normal things that people do when they are 18 to 22 in college, only I was doing them in the military where you have a lot more restrictions, underage drinking, partying, getting my own place, hanging out with my friends when I should have been working. It's not the best thing to do in the military if you want to have a long military career. After I got out of the military, I did the other things that society expected me of. I got a job and pizza delivery guy, went to community college, but as I relate these videos back and review my life, I realized that I was always searching for some way to make sense of the world, and when I would buy into a narrative or a path, I would quickly figure it's not for me. The people at community college I didn't relate to, or Cal State San Bernardino, which I didn't relate to at all as well. I have works that I've been going on over of my time during doing these things. I picked up a friend from Texas that I felt was also, as I was going about figuring out my own path, every now and then I would reach out for friends that I felt were falling off as well. Realizing in this life, if you don't do the given thing, which is go to school and then get a job, you can quickly fall off and do self-harm. So I had friends who got into methamphetamines. I had friends who got into heroin and opioids. I had a friend in Mexico who was possibly going to make some bad decisions in his life. Not in Mexico, in Texas, border town with Mexico. So we went and we got him That was my childhood best friend. Brought him back to California. Wasn't able to get traction in Southern California. I would create groups and then abandon them. Went to Central California, Santa Cruz. Brought some friends up there. They turned over leaves of their life. And so trying to bring friends together, create something, but then I find, looking back, some of them maybe feel I abandoned them. I'm trying to correct this narrative in my own life that I was searching for something, I wasn't running away from something. So I guess I feel misunderstood not only by society but my friend group and my parents. But the idea with these videos is to articulate a narrative and a wisdom which I've been working on all this time, which I've captured in these little breadcrumbs, what I call them, of pieces of art. After a time in my 20s of moving pretty much every 3 months, living in Central California, Southern California, a lot of jobs, a lot of emotional instability with a girl that I felt I was in love with, but she wasn't giving me the time of day because she was currently addicted to heroin, who's still in my life as a friend now. It's good when we can keep those people that we invest so much of our narrative in, because they hold keys to our childhood and who we are. I went to New York and I met a girl who we call Shaw, who was also dropped out of the given narrative, but she was being a dominatrix and partying a lot, exploring her sexuality with a reckless abandon that only the young can afford to do, because when you're young, you're plastic and you have a short memory, and if you have a crazy time, it's a crazy story now. But we found each other, and we found love with each other. She showed me that that blind spot of whether I'm worthy of love no longer exists. Her and then other relationships showed me that there is a good person within me that I can share with, a female energy, and we can create something together. I have the ability to have a partner, which is a doubt until you do. Maybe you should marry the first one, maybe you shouldn't. Who's to say? Shah, I felt like I needed to do some more growing and living. So we broke up. It wasn't the most honest way to separate, but you get better, and that's why you get dance partners to practice, as long as you're honest with yourself. Sincerity and honesty correct towards truth. That's a saying that I seem to be coming back to as I go through this path of reviewing my life. When I was with Shah, I did try to buy into the what you should do with your life dominant narrative. So every time in my life when I go off and do something crazy, I did give authority or narratives that were accepted the chance to prove their worth in my life. So I like the fact that I've been very, I believe, fair and even-handed. I went in the military to see firsthand what it was all about. So my opinions of the military are based off of people I know in it, and people I know who are still in it, so I see their whole path. I know a guy who's a sergeant major. He's going for sergeant major. He's been in for 18 years. I know him when I'm 36 now. I know him when I was 18 and he was 18. In basic training, his hair was bleached yellow with a bunch of spots because he knew it was being shaved off. He already knew his career. He knew he was doing 20 years. And I see him now, and I told him recently, reached out to him and said, I'm really proud of what he's created with his life. Even though it's not your life, doesn't mean that you can't be proud for your friends. So, experientially, I did sales during the housing boom, and then during the recession, I worked for Household Finance, which was a part of the reason why we had the recession. Lowering their standards in order to overextend household credit. They were one of the companies asking people to pull as much money as they can out of their homes, not properly advising them. I saw that from the inside because I was their employee. I worked in insurance. I worked in sales most of my life. I worked in a Greenpeace just as a collecting donations off the street. But all of these organizations give me another experiential piece to the puzzle. You can read the news and you can read books, but it's good to get first-hand knowledge of these things. So when I met Shah, my first real relationship after that, Addiction Girl taught me about deception, the deceptive form of love, and also about loving through insecurity. merely to not be lonely or not. She just taught me a lot of things that you have to go through in order to not repeat those mistakes. Then I got shot, and I tried to sell insurance. I tried to get a house and do the normal things. Found that I wasn't satisfied. I found that the things that I value in life, truth, character, and honesty, aren't. My parents are calling me right now, but I'm going to finish this video before I call them back. They're on the road. Just because we're in constant communication with modern technology doesn't mean that you have to be at the beck and call of others. Most communications aren't emergencies, and they can wait. They also have the ability to text me on this pad, which I'm reading from as well. Let me see if they've texted me to make sure it's not an emergency. Emergencies, people contact someone through multiple channels. So no, that was their desire to talk to me right now. We'll talk to them in a minute. So with Shah, I settled down first in Santa Cruz, then in Berkeley, thinking, okay, Santa Cruz is too small. Berkeley, I have my own job. Santa Cruz, I was working for someone else. Time to start a business. This is going to fulfill me. It's going to fulfill my independence, my ambition. Being in Mexico for a little bit during my 20s, before I met Shah, I realized that even when I'm doing the writing and other things, my mind is always still business mind. I was thinking about starting an English-speaking company down there. Not so much to teach it, but to have high-level conversations of English speakers having high-level conversations with executives, because I was hired at a company, me not having any credentials, but because I could speak decently, as you can tell from this video. There was a market out there, and I thought, well, if I could do this with no credentials for this guy, I can open up my own company and find expatriates like myself just to read high-level magazines with executives and help them with the conversational English, which a native speaker should be able to do if they're articulate with a decent education, even if they don't have credentials. And that opened my eyes up to this other aspect of trying to live an honest life, be honest about the aspects of my personality. If you want to have an honest expression of yourself, you don't want to suppress any natural expressions of yourself. That being merely an artist wasn't completely who my character seemed to be. It seemed also to be an entrepreneur, because down in Mexico, I was living on a roof in a tent, writing by candlelight, getting some really good work done and some good inspiration and a lot of images, and I'm really happy of the work that I worked on then, which I read, the Amnesty short story, play, part of a novel, whatever it is. But yeah, I also realized some other things about myself. Came back, started working for my folks. And then when I got in that relationship with Shah, I thought, well, I have the love, I have the inspiration, I have the art that always comes out, and then I'll do the business in order to get that out of the way. But I didn't have the politics. So in trying to start my business in Berkeley, I saw this documentary about Granny D. And Granny D ran for the House of Representatives. She also did some advocacy just as a citizen. And the narrative I was constructing about my life, I was also constructing about history, trying to construct an honest narrative of history, because since I was in high school, I had an underground newspaper, knowing that there were purposeful deceptions being fed to us as citizens, which we could all tell were lies. And so it seemed like the dominant narrative had a lot of purposeful misinterpretations of reality. And as we walk through reality along with the creators of the dominant narrative, you start to see how they edit out certain parts of reality, and then they twist others to support the power structures which they're on top of. The creators of the dominant narrative all have something to benefit from this. The political brokers get to stay in power, and if you look at the personalities, they seem like the type of personalities who love power for the sake of power and not for values. Most of them do, and that's why they conduct their politics in such cynical ways, because for them it's about obtaining and keeping power. This counts for the top political personalities on the left as well as the right, whatever, Republican and Democrat, since those terms don't mean anything. Then, of course, they're brokering power for the corporations, and the corporations, they have a profit motive. And then you have dynastic concentrations of power as well, which you can find in financial centers, so families who have held finances for generations. And then you can also find in new economies. As technology opens up new economies, you find new players. Some of the old players go extinct or are cannibalized by those at the top of this pyramidal structure in society. And then some of the new players, even though from the outside they promised they would hold true to their values, like Google's "Don't Be Evil," as soon as they start playing the game, well, they have to get with the music, get with the program. So they start building moats around their businesses, start finding ways in which they too can manipulate the dominant narrative in order to buttress their own power systems. And so they start, whether it's conscious actors all acting independently in concert, or something happening unconsciously where it's just a system of inputs and feedback. And what we would say in insurance, it might be a morale hazard. A morale hazard is where there's no morale to guard against risk. And so if your actuary, who creates the statistics of how many times a catastrophe should happen, if they notice that catastrophes or policies are paying out more than what should be statistically happening, then you might have a morale risk. You might have an incentive structure in place where people are acting more hazardous or less safe because of certain incentives, because they know that they can malinger, or they can sit at home if they get disability, or that there's the culture where they figure you're just going to pay a claim anyways. There's no reason to keep a safety culture. It's the opposite of having a good safety officer who instills a culture of safety, and you do it because it's the right thing to do, and values that aren't so much personal enrichment motivated or profit motivated, because those only go so far. So I'm getting sidetracked though. I saw Granny D. I decided, you know what, I'm going to run for the governor of California. So I take Sha with me, my new love, who proves to be my new love by saying, I'm coming with you, you can't get rid of me that easily. After 3 or 4 months of mostly using her money, I did get rid of her, not easily. It was mean. And then I went back home, where I wrote even more, synthesized that experience in as much art as I can. After that, being honest with myself, trying to construct this narrative and character of myself, I knew I needed a break, and I needed to live more. I needed to take the ability to be loved that Sha gave me and spend that a little bit, that currency, that self-worth. So I went to the Caribbean, where I could get away from this dominant narrative and also from my work. Luckily or unluckily, depending on how you see it, my laptop was stolen the first week I was there. So I couldn't do any writing, couldn't do any political stuff. So most of the time I was there was non-internet, non-writing. I did read books still. I believe I read Culture and Imperialism and some other good books while I was down there. Always reading. But yeah, I also loved, and I lived, and I got my body stronger. I got more confident in my physical ability as I did when I was wrestling in high school. But I also got more confident sharing my body with others. As one of the more recent videos, I had a connection with a tourist, which actually emotionally, I was able to be very vulnerable and open myself up with her quickly. Not just because we had sex the first night we hung out, but because, well, the tourist situation, that's allowed to happen with less judgment. It's less of a big deal because you only have so much time with each other. And then also, we had a traumatic experience where I was attacked when I was with her on a beach, ended up in the hospital. And so we went through a lot of emotions quickly, which led me to ask her if I could stay with her in Seattle. She said yes, actually. But my friend Addie, the first love when I was young, was in a bad place in Florida with her mental health, so I went to visit her. And her boyfriend, who later on succumbed to addiction and overdosed without Addie in his life. So he was a troubled soul. He put me in jail. He called the police on us and got her arrested and held against her will because she had obvious signs of mental distress. So you can hold people against their will if they pose a threat to themselves in certain states. Florida's one of those states. And then me trying to be chivalrous, which is something I'm still learning, when to be chivalrous and when to be rational. Didn't want her to get in trouble for the marijuana we were smoking. I said it was mine. And on the way to jail, the police tell me if I had said it was not mine, it would have been the owner of the apartment's fault, which was the boyfriend. But he didn't need any more problems from me. He had his own path in life and his own struggles, which eventually he didn't overcome. So another, I said the truth and sincerity corrects towards wisdom. Another saying that I've been saying a lot over these videos is that the moral high ground only has compassion, for your enemies are those who come against you. So if you have anything other than compassion, perhaps there's something you should do to secure your safety, or perhaps there's something you should meditate on to secure your peace. But once you've secured your safety, you should have peace. And if you don't have peace, then those emotions, whatever your spiritual path is, whether you use one of the faiths or no faith, allow your emotions to be meditated on so they can transform from the lower state emotions, which are defensive, I believe, anger, distress, disillusion, cynicism, anything that feels negative, to those higher form emotions, compassion, love, peace, oneness with the universe. So, but that takes time, and it can't be rushed. This whole process is a way of finding blind spots in my life and identifying things that I should meditate on, that perhaps I need to elevate those emotions to a higher state of peace. So this has been useful. I just stated in about a half hour so far the narrative that I'm constructing, which is helpful. I went back to Puerto Rico after I was arrested, and after that, girl invited me to Seattle, and then since I was in jail, I couldn't go there. My life took a right turn. I had probably had enough of Addie for a little bit. She didn't treat me the best while I was there, ignored me for a week or two, and then got arrested. So it was another experience in our relationship book, which is varied and many. I've had a lot of good ones this year, so we're putting money back in the bank now. But and I'm very proud of the person that she's becoming, which reinforces the way I live my life too. Don't leave your friends behind, and put boundaries. So I definitely had to learn how to put boundaries with her, so things like this wouldn't happen over and over, where I would interact with her and get the worst end of the stick. But that's another thing. I have these sayings which are coming up as I review my life. The strong can afford to be vulnerable. The strong can afford to be kind. If I'm living my life in a way to become stronger physically and mentally, then I can afford to be kind and just know when I'm getting into a situation in which I may be taken advantage of, how much I'm willing to give up. So that way, worst case scenario, I've already accounted for a possible loss. And I think that's a way to deal with people who are in such a position that they may take advantage of you. You do so, but do so willingly, with an open heart, and knowing when you're going to cut your losses, so that way they don't bleed you dry. In this life, just because someone has an addiction doesn't mean that they're stupider than you. A lot of people out there with blind spots actually also have great gifts, mentally, physically. So their addiction preys on them, and it could also prey on you through their actions if you don't quarantine it somehow. You don't want to get into situations relying purely on your own cleverness and awareness, especially with a power as strong as addiction. You want to set boundaries before the engagement, is what I've learned. So that way, if you're getting confused by their mendacity or their duplicity, which they aren't even in control of a lot of times, because the addiction can become a primal urge, where it's a foundational urge influencing all others before even conscious thought. Once you get into that line in the sand where you told yourself, this and no more. You're going to have to back up, and that also helps them realign their sense of reality, that there are boundaries which must be respected. Because a lot of times what I found also with addicts is they don't realize how far they're going until these wake-up calls. You can say it's hitting bottom, but I've known many people who've claimed to hit bottom to find out there's only another level. So I haven't found that language is helpful. But boundaries, the language of boundaries are helpful. And if they want to exist outside those boundaries, I've seen addicts hit the supposed bottom, exist outside everyone's boundaries for a long time before they decided to change. So there's hitting bottom, but then sometimes that can become a lifestyle as well. We want to help people with an objective creation of reality, which addiction and also propaganda help obscure, is what I'm finding. I invited Shah with me to Puerto Rico, and that's where I wrote this, The Complete American's Guide to Revolution. It's not where I wrote it. I wrote the table of contents there. Again, with Shah, now the second time, trying to make our relationship work. Hooking up with tourists down there was nice, but I wanted to experience the island with a lover that I knew. Shah seemed like she needed some help, so she came down here. There was another chapter in our relationship, which was great, but eventually I did walk away from that as well. A friend of mine, the politics came back in. It seems like when I satisfied the lower levels of my life, physical security, money, relationship, even art, when I'm writing and poetry, the politics is a higher level which seems to come out, which is purpose. That the purpose of my life is to not only construct my own narrative, but share it with the world if it's a healthy one, which gives me peace, and also if it explains the world in a meaningful way which isn't currently out there as a commonly held explanation. Not a reactionary way, but an honest, objective way of gathering facts from the historic record and putting them into a narrative, as I recognize that the popular conception of the story we tell ourselves as Americans and also as human beings has a lot of flaws. Then as I create my own alternative, I envision that one day I'm going to push that out to compete against the dominant narrative. And perhaps I'll have to adjust my story. Hopefully also society will have to adjust its story. And we can have healthier people who don't have to spend as much effort as I've spent over my life trying to figure out what the fuck is going on, right? So, Shah in paradise, and everyone loves her down there, and we have a really great life. We rented a house for $300, a little one-bedroom shack with wild horses running through the front yard, an acre of land surrounded by trees. When Hurricane Irene came by, we would go out to our front yard because no one could see us, no neighbors, because we were surrounded by trees, and it's in the middle of the country on that island. And we would shower. It was raining nonstop for the week after Irene, and we'd go out and we'd shower in the rain, and then we'd have sex in the rain, and then I think I lost those videos of us just walking to the front yard, the muddy front yard, soaping up, showering, having sex, and just in a field surrounded by trees. I have a lot of pictures of the fish I would catch that she would cook up. It was a very nice life. And I wonder repeatedly as I go over this, how many nice lives I've given up. With her, there's a girl I dated after her, and while I was doing real estate in New York, that I could have married. There's about 2 or 3, but I give them up because I'm starting to recognize the pattern. At my highest forms of happiness, no matter how stable my life is, if I don't have an expression for this political ambition I have of constructing an alternative explanation of reality which has more human values and more actual facts which are unaccounted for in the given narrative. If I can't get that out, I can't be happy, apparently. It's that stubbornness, anti-authoritarian, maybe instilled from my parents who were both the youngest children. Always told to be quiet. So I was raised with a mouth that can't be shut up. I couldn't write something like this in the island. It's not stable enough. You have to work, and you don't really have a computer. I think I was using Shah's computer for a lot of this. But I wrote the outline, which was my conception of, I had an idiot. I love taking a book. What I've also found with my artwork, syntactical interpretation, taking someone else's format and putting my ideas on top of that, whether that is a poetry or whether that's I've done it with short stories. I've also created my own work, but this seems like a method I have for speeding up my ability, my confidence to write something. Is that if I don't quite feel like I'm ready yet, I take a form that's already created and just replace the words with my ideas. So that's what this was. I took the Idiot's Guide to, I think, becoming a writer, probably. And I made the Complete American's Guide to Revolution instead of the Complete Idiot's Guide. I made my own headings, chapters. Basically, they had 25 chapters, I think, and I had 25 chapters too. They had 5 sections. I made it 5 sections. They had little cartoon figures on each corner of the page. So I found a little Che Guevara cartoon figure. Of course, I don't have any money to pay this person who wrote this, who made that picture, but with the internet the way it is, we should be able to, if the money comes in, find him and compensate him accordingly. Or maybe that should be me, as a little cartoon figure guiding you through this. I really like the work, and we're already at 41 minutes, so we won't be able to go through and analyze it. But what I've discovered doing these videos and rereading all of the work that I've created in my life is that my strengths are being well read and broad, and so I can pull in a lot of different facts from multiple disciplines because I haven't read deeply in any one subject that much. Maybe in the creation of art and the idea of how to write. I read as many books on how to write as possible, and I love poetry. So I have a couple strong interests, but my knowledge is usually generally broad, but that means I have a lot of quotations in here from 50 people maybe, or events in time. I forgot how I wrote it. I had a pitch letter that I wrote for this project. And then another, so varied references seems to be a strength of mine. And then another one is interesting metaphors or interesting analogies, ways to summarize complex information in simple ways. So that would be 2. So I have a breadth of knowledge, if not depth, interesting ways to phrase complicated information to make it digestible. And then the third one would be probably emotional impact. I really try to, all my life I've been cultivating this sensitivity, which I feel I was born with, but I feel like at multiple times during my life I'm asked to either sacrifice or deny. And as much as I can, I've tried to take moral stands where I thought they were justified. A lot of times when they weren't justified, and I lead myself to funny situations, but try to do the right thing morally as it applies to my own ethics, and not just blindly as it applies to the authoritarian structure in which I happen to find myself. So I brought that up because out of everything in here, one of the things I really liked are how I described the economy. Here we go. Well, I'm going to have to break this down. I should outline this because there is I made some nice points that it took me a while to get to those points. So, this is until this point in my life, this is a synthesis of my political beliefs to this point. The only thing I've added since then, I wrote this when I was 29, right before I got into Occupy Wall Street, and these are technically the Occupy Wall Street videos. The only thing I've added since then is ability to make money, so I've taken off that blind spot, the ability to execute within the corporate sphere. A fraction of my potential, but I've started, and that's the most important part. I proved to myself I can. A little bit more on the blind spot of love. I've created more relationships with various types of women, and although Addie was the first manipulative form of love I encountered, I believe her better, the dancer girl, is probably the most manipulative female energy I've encountered. Not in a bad way. She has a great heart, but she She is a nuclear force who I see usually is in control on all of her exchanges. For me to dance with her in the art of love was a master class in controlling my own energy and knowing when to give it and then when to withdraw it. We loved each other more than we hurt each other, but she had the ability to control situations in love, which someone of her experience and her profession can only do. Someone who is that strong with their physical body and their physical energy. Then her female spirit, she also was very much in control of. And yeah, she taught me a lot. She still is teaching me a lot through heartbreak. We're not with each other right now. So yeah, I really liked how I put, when I say I like to end up poverty, and I put the ending poverty requires you to question the entire economic system. It's not in that part, but I basically said it was a rat race where we're all on the wheel of, where is it? You have to break this down. When writing, sometimes the words get in the way, especially with a 20,000 word piece. It'll take you a half an hour, 10 hours just to read it. So when you start editing, it becomes a marathon. So what I would do with this, and I'm remembering how I write, I would break it down as an outline of thoughts and just make sure that the thoughts are all coherent. In order, if I'm going to do anything with this, I might just take the ideas and leave the piece. But I would make a bulletin or an outline, a thought outline, which I could read in 15, 30 seconds, and then make sure that I'm actually walking in a developed way. And then that's where I would find the ideas that I really like in here. But I was going to find at least one, because one stuck with me over the last couple days. Consumers versus citizens. I really like that section because that incorporates a lot of what I saw when I was traveling around California and I went to the state capitol. That is perhaps the largest gap in our dominant narrative, is that they've replaced civics with consumption. That's not only the largest gap, but the easiest to explain because we have the most evidence. It's during this holiday shopping season. Any civic holiday now has become a consuming holiday. You're supposed to express yourself through consumption, not civics. So that just describes how our democracy and our government, which should be open systems, have been closing for a long time. If they ever really were truly open, that might have just been a marketing ploy. Yeah. It says, to add insult to injury, the devil's gift of consumerism replaces old-fashioned civics, which used to be the heart of American life. I might have been too idealistic then. Perhaps I'm more cynical now. Now I've made a little bit of money and read a little bit more. This is what's interesting when I wrote each one of these at a point in my life. They capture what I believed then. And I have to go with my judgment now because even though that's the question. As long as I've retained my sincerity, I have to go with my judgment now. Now, if I've become desensitized, which I feel like this year has been to reclaim some of that sensitivity, but by trying to always do the right thing, hopefully I haven't become desensitized to the point that I have to trust previous years' judgment because it's more honest. Hopefully now I can be as honest as I was then, only I have more information. I have thousands of people I met in real estate, hundreds of people that I've seen their bank accounts, their bank statements, their life. So I got to see people moving to Manhattan, their children, their guarantors, their parents, vice presidents of JP Morgan and Chase, venture capitalists. For the most part, people just who have $100,000, $150,000 salary jobs, but some of them $40,000, $60,000 salary jobs. I got to see the underbelly of society in a major metropolitan area, their financial profiles, where they live, and not only that, I was a person finding their new home. So I was a person of authority. So these people got to look up to me, and then also I had relations with some of them, well, friendships and romances. I lived with one of my clients, and we broed out for a little bit. So that helped my blind spot of class separatism that we have. The poor usually don't mingle with the rich. By me starting off poor and becoming middle class, upper middle class, $175,000 I made on my last taxes. I was about to break 200. I was approaching the top 5%, if not the top 1% of society. So I gotta I gotta check out all of society from the bottom to the top. And that top, since I wasn't born into, I got to most of my clients did belong to that, because most of the people who moved to Manhattan have a leg up. Not as many self-starters as you would think. This was my experience as a real estate agent, the data that I collected. But how did I get to real estate? I was wrote the I have 10 more minutes, so I have to wrap this up now. I wrote the outline for this book in Puerto Rico. And then, actually, my boss in Puerto Rico, I told him I was going to check out his insurance, because knowing how things operated down there, I said this might not even be real insurance. And it wasn't. I called the company checking out his policy, and the company wasn't in business for the last 2 years. So this guy's paying premiums to who knows who, this general agent who's collecting them, and he has no policy to speak of. He's a tour guide down there. So you're paying, what was he paying? 6,000, I think, a year. No, he was paying like 8,000 a year. And all you really want to claim is in case maybe someone gets bit by a shark, or someone gets their foot run over by one of your trucks. With a tour guide business, I would imagine you're not putting in a lot of claims, but when you need the insurance, when that person gets bit by a shark, you need that $500,000 lawsuit protection. You need $1 million worth of coverage, because when things go bad in nature, they could go really bad, and it might not be your fault. If you have normal training and cover your ass with all the other ways that you should as a business owner, then that insurance is just to keep you from going under when that catastrophe happens. While I was there, someone got bit by a shark, so it does happen. It was one of the smaller operators. No reason to sue them, because they don't even have a business license, let alone insurance. But my boss, I know him and his family. As things happen in a small town community, once you know someone in their family, you know them. And my parents came down there, and I introduced them to everyone, so they knew where I was coming from and who I was. I checked out his insurance, found out that it wasn't worth the paper it was written on, let alone the money he was still paying for it. So I told him, I advised him he should sue that company. But other than that, I found him a real policy. I saved him $2,000, and it was real insurance. But he had to start doing things that you have to do when you have real insurance. Itemizing all of his equipment, or else how can you put a claim in when someone steals a trailer full of kayaks? It's 20 kayaks. No, it could be 10 kayaks. Each kayak is worth $700 new. So that's $5,000 to $7,000 right there. So, but that means you have to have now serial numbers on your kayaks. You have just little things. But if you're going to pay for insurance, you might as well pay for the right thing. So after I did that for him, being his tour guide, but just taking a look at his books, that's another thing when I was in Mexico. No matter how wild I am, no matter how artistic I am, can't turn off this business mind, which I seem to have been born with. He gave me $1,000. I didn't ask for it. I said, whatever you think it's worth. He came by afterwards, and he was like, here you go. Just gave me $1,000 in cash. That's character stuff. Dealing with older men, older people in general. Just how you take care of things. We didn't. I just appreciate the work he had given me ever since I got there, and I appreciate who he is, even though everyone in my life has blind spots, and I don't want those to become my own. But yeah, it was a handshake. I said I'd look into his stuff, and I did. He didn't tell me he'd compensate me, but he did. I like doing business that way, but you could do it that way only when you have a word and you have character. I said I do what I do, and whatever you think is fair. It was more than enough. So with some of that money, a friend of mine needed someone to drive his car. He had just graduated from Michigan, Ann Arbor, and then he went on to get his PhD. So some of my friends are smart in life. He needed someone to drive his car back to California to give to his mom. He grew up simple like I did. When I got a car in high school, I would drive him to school. We grew up playing chess since we were in 7th grade. So when I beat him down in chess, I tell him, well, where's your PhD now? A little bitch. No, I don't think, do I call him a little bitch? you relate to different friends different ways. But I do tease him for his education if I beat him in chess. But no, he's very good at chess. Although I did win our high school tournament. We had one tournament, chess tournament in high school. And he was usually a stronger player than me, but that day I was stronger. So I think he still remembers that, and he has excuses why he lost. What I found in my chess game is I have an aptitude for high strategy. I don't play the cleanest game, so I'm usually brought down by my own mistakes. But if I'm focusing and playing a clean game, I can usually outwit the other player in forms of creating a strategy. I just have to learn higher level strategy now. So he's a good friend of mine from way back when. I told him if he paid for the gas, I'd do it. I show up in Chicago. I do something I've done often, which is throw up some Craigslist ads for ride shares. I get a girl and I get a guy. The guy is an anarchist, but he's going to school for anarchism, the history of anarchism in Portland or somewhere in Washington State. I leave Shaw. We have another tumultuous breakup. This time she jumps on my back and tries to choke me out. She had a lot of spirit, Shaw. That was the last time we tried to be together. After that, we started doing the friendship thing. I think she started to notice the pattern. And also that she couldn't give me apparently what I needed in this other part of my personality, this political part, although she did the other one so well. So I left her to fend for herself on the island. She had another guy in the house within a month. The women I seem to attract in life are very capable of feeding themselves, and they're with me because they want to, but not out of desperation. They have a lot of options. Now she got a strong, strapping young lad to help her out as soon as I was out of there. Sometimes you need those rebounds too. For my part, I almost hooked up with one of these girls when we were driving across country, and I was talking to the anarchist kid, which is a whole nother story. Maybe we'll talk about that in the next. I haven't even talked about the documents, but this is how I got to Occupy Wall Street. I drop off the anarchist kid above San Francisco. I drop off the girl in San Francisco. It gave us some time alone so we could decompress, because me and her had a sexual encounter, an encounter of a sexual nature. What we did is we were driving from Chicago to California. The anarchist kid was being dropped off north of San Francisco, but we had to stop for the night to spend the night. I told him I had a tent. We were probably going to spend the night. And we stayed probably a couple hours north of San Francisco. And that's where me and the girl had an encounter while the anarchist kid slept outside. But we don't have time to talk about that now. And then the anarchist kid told me, there's protesting in Wall Street in New York. And I said, that's funny. I'm writing a book about revolution. And he said, well, it's happening. I'm thinking about going, but I don't know if it's stupid. And I said, well, I'll probably go then. So then by the time I got to my parents' house in Southern California, my path was set. That October, I wrote this based off of the outline, the table of contents. My plans are always too ambitious. I don't seem, and I'm trying to learn this, to have a rational idea of how much effort or time it takes to complete these artistic tasks. So in the time I gave myself to complete the whole book, I only completed one chapter, which is okay, because to sell a nonfiction book, from what I knew of the industry, you only need a table of contents and the first chapter, and that's enough to get you in advance. So I completed it by the end of October. The last of those funds I had from the getting the insurance from my old boss, and my friend let me drive his car across country. I bought my plane ticket to go to New York, and that was October 31st. I usually fly on holidays in order to, usually they're cheaper tickets. So I arrived in New York November 1st, walked up to the Occupy Wall Street protest, and I had a laptop, and I had 10 or 20 copies of this printed out, the first chapter, 20,000 words. And I was going to pitch my book idea. Well, I was going to check out the Occupy Wall Street, and some of this was revised that last month while I was reading about Occupy Wall Street, so that's how it made it in here before I even went to Occupy Wall Street. I was going to go check it out with them, live with them, among my people, the revolutionaries, and then add their wisdom to this book that I was going to sell, The Complete American's Guide to Revolution. Irreverent, but also factually solid counter-narrative to heal society as I was trying to heal myself. Things didn't quite go as planned, though, which is why 8 years later, I'm still on this path, just picking up the pieces of where I was at. Got spun for a loop these last couple of years. We're trying to